Folks, it is the 26th of June 2025. It's a Thursday. Welcome back to another video where I talk about things, and hope you're all having a good time, whatever it is you're doing. Hope that it's peaceful, healthy, prosperous, and all that, and happy where you are. So what is happening right now? Well, in the world of geopolitics, on the matters regarding Iran and Israel and the U.S., the ceasefire that went into effect 2 days ago seems to be holding up. That said, everything I said about this ceasefire still stands. I believe it is still bad for the various reasons I outlined yesterday in the videos and the live streams, and also in the places where I wrote it. Posted on X, published in the Times of Israel, posted on LinkedIn. If you're not following me in any of those places, by all means, feel free to connect with me there. Follow or subscribe, whatever it's called, on different platforms, just like you should here if you want to see more of my videos. So we're going to talk about what is happening right now in Iran, and then maybe we'll get into what is going on with also Trump vis-a-vis what he said before, during, and after his visit to the NATO summit yesterday, when he said a lot of very interesting things that are worthy of being dissected. Maybe some of you will find it more interesting than others. I find it interesting because whenever a president speaks, especially about issues to do with national security and global security issues, it is noteworthy, usually, even if they say something in a drunken stupor, which Trump would not because he doesn't drink, but you get my point, because they're the president, so what they say about security matters, right? Because ultimately they're responsible for it. Right? That is their main number one job, is the security interests of the United States, right? So what happened since the ceasefire? What did I tell you what happened in Iran since the ceasefire? I told you that pretty much immediately the Iranians would announce that they are actually going to go ahead and start rebuilding the nuclear program. And that is exactly what they've done. And they've done it in a number of ways. First of all, you had that Russian sock puppet who says whatever Putin wants him to say out loud. Well, now we can basically say the quiet powder out loud, he said, in different words, but he basically said that exact sentence. He said, yes, Iran is building a nuclear weapon, and now they're going to double time it. What did I tell you guys would happen? I said literally they're going to double time it. They're going to, and he said now that Russia or other states might sell them a bomb. And they're going to negotiate with China, Russia, North Korea, whoever. And they're going to probably buy a bomb from somebody. Just like I said. That's why this dictatorship had to be overthrown, not just weakened. Because weakened doesn't do anything. You leave them in power, you've achieved nothing. Absolutely nothing. All you've done is anger them more and make them want to spend whatever resources they have left on buying a nuke. And if you think they're not going to get some nukes on loan or for very cheap, they will, because there are some actors who don't really believe that they're completely genocidal. The thing is, they really are genocidal. They really are suicidal. People are like, oh, the Iranians are smart and they're not actually suicidal. No, they actually are. If you actually understand that they have an ideology, and that ideology calls on them to seek the end of the bloody world, all right, that is actually their ideology. If you don't think they believe that, you don't understand them. Okay, now, what is the next thing that they did that I said literally would happen? The first physical action that I said would happen after the ceasefire. They are going to begin what? Cracking down on local people. Cracking down on people in Iran, literally, right? So yesterday they announced that they caught and hanged 6 Mossad agents, which is obviously BS, because why would you hang 6 actual Mossad agents the day after, or the day that you caught them? Makes no sense. You'd want to interrogate them for a very long time to extrapolate, to extract all the information you possibly could about them, right? And you'd want to do a public show trial and all this other stuff. So it's obviously complete BS. Maybe they hang 6 people. They hang people every day. but they definitely didn't hang 6 actual Mossad agents, right, in a day. That's obviously BS. They say that for propaganda, to make them feel to make the hurt less hurt, right? Because they got their butts whooped, kinetically speaking, in this fight. But the regime survives, so they didn't lose the fight. It's very easy to argue that point. Yes, they lost on points. Yes, they got a technical knockout, but they didn't lose because they're still in power. And what are they doing in that power? First of all, reports are that they're rounding up, they're going into the houses where Jews lived, they're searching their houses, and they're randomly taking people, probably mostly men, but definitely not only men, right? They could be taking away women, girls, boys, doesn't matter. They don't care. They're the IRGC, they're terrorists, and they're anti-Semitic as hell. And they're disappearing them. Nobody knows where they're being disappeared to. Exactly what I told you. They're going to be disappearing them, beating them, torturing them, doing other bad things to them, maybe even killing them. Not maybe, probably, and almost surely. And what else are they doing? Well, they're cracking down on the average Iranian too, not just the Jews. Now they're stopping cars in traffic. They're setting up checkpoints in traffic to randomly search people's phones. And if they find anything on anyone's phone that's in any way can be interpreted as being, not a super fan of the regime, like if they just criticize the regime in any way during the period of time, or even before, or even after, the 12 days of fighting, if they find anything on their phones, they search their WhatsApps, they search their messages, they search whatever, they find anything on their phones that suggests that they might be in touch with people who are not fans of the regime, or that they themselves said anything that's not super fan of the regime, that's it. They get arrested. They get accused of being a Zionist and a Mossad agent, and then they have to go through that whole procedure where they may be horribly mistreated and or even possibly lose their life. Hi there. I see people saying hello, so I said hi. Hi to all of you. Nice to see you here. So exactly what I told you was going to happen. That the IRGC is going to start cracking down on the Iranians is exactly what we're seeing happening. Right, reports are coming in left and right. I mean, I'm getting a lot of messages from people in Iran who promptly delete their messages for safety reasons, and I delete them as well, right, after moving those messages to a secure device, like another secure device, and then I delete the original one from the message platform, and they do too. By the way, if you message with anybody in Iran, make sure that both of you delete the messages. You should use only, temporary messages, and you should delete them anyway, like actively, so that nobody can find anything. And you should only send those messages on end-to-end encrypted services so that they cannot be intercepted by the middleman software. And you should only use them on secure devices. And frankly, at this point in time, you should not be talking about things that are critical of Iran if you're talking with people in Iran. Yes, if people there want to voice their concerns and their expressions to you, whatever, let them do whatever they want, but don't try to tell people what to say or not to say. But if they can avoid being too critical for their own safety, they probably should be, right? I'm not telling them to censor or not express themselves. I'm just saying anybody that does that has to really know what they're doing with encryption and deleting their messages and security, because the IRGC is still in control. The Ayatollah is still in control. They are brutal dictators. They do not take kindly to any criticism. And right now, they are very butthurt, and they are very angry, and they're out for vengeance. And they are going to crack down and punish anybody that they suspect of anything, right, having to do. And by the way, if they see 100 deleted messages, like where it says this message has been deleted, this message has been deleted, that's they're going to use that as suspicion. I'm telling you. So don't have long conversations where you criticize the government or whatever. You have 100 messages back and forth. It's really not safe. There are other ways of doing this, right? And you can use end-to-end, totally encrypted voice calls, right, on a platform like WhatsApp or whatever, where the call isn't, or not even WhatsApp, but yeah, you could use WhatsApp, but there are other ways You can make the call itself, like a voice call, on an encrypted line, so that there's no many messages back and forth. There's no message to listen to. There's no record of it. There's no trace. There's no archive of it. It's just a conversation you have like in the good old days of telephones before every phone number was being spied on and recorded. All right? And that's what you want to do. You don't want to have tons of information in writing on a device where many messages need to be deleted. And then if an Iranian person, like a police person or whatever from the IRGC, looks at the message, they can say, well, why have you deleted 100 messages? That's very suspicious. And then they can just haul them away. Again, they don't need reasons. They can just do it because they're butthurt. That's what they're doing. They don't have a due process there. Right? They don't have a proper judicial system. Yes, they have courts and judges and lawyers and all that. But it's all BS, right? It's all kangaroo court. Why? Because ultimately, the Ayatollah is the dictator. He decides whatever he interprets the Muslim law of Sharia, of Shiite Sharia says is the law. It's whatever he says. It's not whatever the actual well established constitutional judges determine. It's not like in America. Okay, you can't go through 12 levels of appeal over a period of many years to get your court, your case may be heard one day by the Supreme Court kind of thing. It doesn't work like that. It's, edicts and determinations by one crazy old man who wears his turban a little too tight around his head and can't think straight. And he determines what's holy and what's not holy. And the guy's a complete genocidal maniac, bent on literally destroying the world. So why would you take his word for anything? So I'm just saying, if you want to stay safe and you're over there, best not to have lots of writing communications. Do phone calls that are fully encrypted. Don't do videos showing yourself being critical. That's just too risky, right? Now, if you're going to do videos, you can wear masks, completely hide your face, completely make your, visual surroundings not trackable in any way. Like you can be in front of a random white wall or whatever that is not traceable with no objects, and the light shadow and all that stuff needs to be considered. Don't do live streams if you're in Iran, or if you do them in extremely safe places that can't be tracked down. Keep them short, keep them punchy. Keep your messaging on point. If you're going to wear masks and all that, also do voice changes if you can. Use a different voice. Use a voice filter. Something that doesn't sound anything like you. All right? Or something that sounds synthesized. It doesn't matter if it sounds like you or not, as long as it sounds completely synthesized so that anybody could do that voice. Do these things for a reason. Don't wear your own clothes that you regularly wear on the live stream. And if you do wear, clothes that you typically wear, make sure that they're clothes that anybody could have, that look identical to anybody else, like a white t-shirt or something. Something that anyone might have. Generic white t-shirt or generic white long sleeve shirt, doesn't matter, right? Why am I telling people to be so paranoid about their appearance in live streams if they're doing stuff from Iran? Because again, right now, if you're in Iran, you are a massive suspect to the IRGC. It doesn't matter who you are, right? It doesn't matter who you are. They are looking to find every single person that they can blame something on, rightly or wrongly, and it'll mostly be wrongly. I think they work with the Zionists and all this nonsense. Okay. Now, is there a probability that there are a lot of people in Iran who work with Israel? Yeah, there's a pretty good probability of that, because that's how Israel has so much good intelligence on what's happening in Iran, right? But at the same time, it's not like, hundreds of thousands of people or something, right? But they're going to try to accuse as many people as possible because they're angry, they're butthurt. They're really upset about the fact that they got their asses handed to them by this tiny country that has 1/10 of their population. Not even, really, but 1/10 of the population of Iran. I guess you could say about 1/10 of the population of Iran and 1/70th of the size of Iran. Just imagine that. And Iran is 70 times bigger in terms of physical space than Israel, and has 10 times the population, which means that it has a lot more land per person right? So they have a lot more resources, natural resources per person and as a nation than Israel, and yet somehow they got their asses handed to them by a tiny little country, barely the size of New Jersey, and that's only if you include all of Judea, Samaria, and the Gaza Strip. If you remove those things, I mean, Israel is barely bigger than Rhode Island, practically. It's tiny. It's like literally, you know, almost half the size of New Jersey, or 2/3 the size of New Jersey. It's really small, right? Israel is not a big country physically. It does not have natural resources. Like, we don't have any oil and gas. As the old joke goes, you know, God made the Jews walk. You know, when the Jews, on the least, it doesn't have any oil or gas, or any oil anyway, because it turned out there's some gas off of the coast in what's called the Leviathan fields. The Leviathan is named after this biblical creature, the Leviathan, which is, you know, can be arguably a giant whale or some other kind of giant sea creature. But the point is, the Leviathan is a giant gas field off of the coast of Israel. Why am I mentioning that in this? Israel shares the Leviathan gas field with Lebanon, but not just Lebanon, specifically Hezbollah. Like literally Hezbollah. Right? Hezbollah made an agreement with Israel years ago. And they made that agreement in order for Israel and the Hezbollah not to fight with each other. Israel agreed to let Hezbollah control, not Lebanon, Hezbollah control a portion of the Leviathan gas field. In other words, Israel agreed to let Hezbollah earn revenue from Israel's gas resources. Now, they will argue, well, it's not really Israel's gas resources because technically it's in our water. And Israel argues, no, it's actually in our water. So there's a dispute over whose water it is. And rather than have yet another war about it, they both agreed, okay, Israel, you get this portion because that's clearly in your water. And Hezbollah gets this other portion because it's in the area that you guys dispute, even though it's, if you look at the map, it's clearly in Israel's water. But Israel did not want to have another war over a portion of a gas field. So rather than fight another war over it,
you're referring to the 2022 Maritime Border Agreement between Israel and Lebanon, which was mediated by the United States.
Yeah.
This agreement aimed to resolve a long-standing dispute over a gas-rich area in the Mediterranean Sea.
Sure. Yeah. Google Gemini will tell you that it's between Israel and Lebanon, but it's specifically between Israel and Hezbollah. Okay, Israel and Lebanon. We're not arguing about it. It was Israel and Hezbollah that were arguing about it. The Karish gas field, the Leviathan gas field, part of the EZ, the Kana gas field, and the dispute and Hezbollah's role. Gemini tells you the Iran-backed group launched drones towards the Karish rig and warned they would attack Israel if Israel began producing before a deal was reached. The agreement was a compromise. Israel secured control over Karish, and in exchange, Lebanon received full control over Kana. But it's not just Lebanon; it's specifically the Hezbollah controls that part. Is this recording? I hope this has been recording. I don't know if you guys have been hearing that. But basically, Google Gemini is saying that Lebanon got control in the agreement between Israel and Lebanon over the gas field. Yes, on paper, Lebanon got the control, but specifically, Hezbollah is the group in control of the gas field. It's not the government of specifically from that agreement. So when people say Israel and Lebanon made an agreement over the Leviathan gas field, that Kana and Karish, it's really not. It's really Israel and the Hezbollah, right? Because Hezbollah was the group issuing threats and sending drones to attack the oil and gas field, the gas field, not oil, and had it not been for those threats, Israel would not have signed any agreement. But because of Israel didn't want to have to fight that war, they said to the Hezbollah, okay, fine, you guys can have control over those gas fields. You guys can have the revenue for the gas fields. Let's just avoid having another war here, people, because nobody needs that. Least of all the government of Lebanon, by the way. All right, they were the ones who wanted an agreement more than anybody, more than the Israelis. And I mean, they certainly had control until the war last year between Israel and the Hezbollah, when Israel basically systematically took out the control now, even after all of that, because they're out at sea. Okay, they're not shooting at Israel from the gas fields. They're out at sea, and they are just, sci-fi. Right, Hezbollah is making money from the gas, and Israel is making money from the gas, and had to fight Israel until the bitter end, when they got their butts whooped and their phones blown up, and that is ultimately what cost them their militant organization a significant amount of damage. And at the same time, their sponsor Iran got cold feet for a little while. But now that Iran got its butts kicked, and specifically because the building that houses the organizational coordination between the government of Iran, right, the Iranian dictatorship, and all of its terrorist proxies, including Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas, because that building was knocked out, and because the Generalissimo in charge of that project, I use that Espanola version on purpose because it just sounds so good. It sounds very coolish. If you're an 80s American, you understand what I'm saying. Because the general days and hour of bombing said, okay, we're going to get rid of as much as we can, because that guy was disassembled, and he meant a lot to the Iranian regime, as much as anybody. So the IRGC and the dictatorship are very bitter about that, and they want, and again, they are strategic in their thinking, in the sense of, like, they will play chess. I mean, we all know, yes, chess, the legend is chess was invented in Persia, right, in Iran, in Persia, thousands of years ago. But actually, there are other legends about it that indicate that it wasn't. But let's just say that it was, okay, for the purpose of this discussion. And generally speaking, that is the place where it is accepted to have been invented, even though there are definitely good academic evidences that it might have been elsewhere. But let's just say it was invented in Iran, okay? Well, what that means is they have thousands of years of history and traditions of being strategic thinkers, is what that means, because they've been playing chess for thousands of years, even if they're not the best at it since a long time. And you could argue, well, they started losing their edge in chess a long time ago, and they really lost it rapidly in the last 45 or so years, which is, their dictatorship came into power 46 years ago. So no surprise there. So anyway, the point is, they are definitely used to being strategic in the way they attack their problems. That doesn't mean that their leadership isn't psychopathic and genocidal and have a crazy bloodlust that they want to see, basically the end of the world. They do. Right? The Ayatollah leads a group in Iran that is their purpose. As I mentioned to you guys yesterday, right, the 12th Mahdi, or the 12th Imam Mahdi, is the 12th Imam Muhammad, son of the 11th Imam Hassan al-Askari. According to the Twelvers, right, which are people who follow the 12th descendant of Muhammad. The Mahdi was born in Samarra around 868, or Samara, probably not pronouncing it perfectly. And his birth date was kept hidden from the public. Okay, but he was born around 868, the year 868, in the Common Era or AD or whatever you want to call it. And he lived under his father's care until 874. So he was 6 years old, roughly, when his father was killed by the Abbasids. And 12er Shia calls their imams, well, they have names, right? Ali, Al-Hassan, Al-Hussein, Ali, Muhammad, Jafar, Musa, Ali, Muhammad, Ali, Al-Hassan, and Muhammad. Right? They have the 12er Shia, 12 imam names in order. Now, why does it matter? Because they believe that this 12th Imam Mahdi is going to come back after every Jewish drop of blood has been spilled, after the last Jew is dead, and after all the infidels and hypocrites are dead. What are the infidels and hypocrites? Infidels and hypocrites are anybody who's not one of their versions of Shiite Islam. If you don't belong to their Islamic perversion of the religion, I say perversion of the religion, I'm speaking specifically of their death cult view, right? And it is a death cult view. Again, I'm not just saying that to hate on them. No, that is what they preach. Like when they come to prayer on Friday and they all get together, family affair, wholesome and everything, they pray for death to America. They say it. It's in their slogans. In order: death to America, death to the UK, death to Israel, and then they usually add in death to the Jews, and then they say death to the infidels and hypocrites. In that order, those 5 things, okay? Sometimes they skip the death to the Jews part and they say death to Israel, or sometimes they skip the death to Israel part and say death to the Jews. It doesn't matter. Okay, when they say Israel, they mean everybody in Israel, Jewish and otherwise. And when they say Jews, they mean the Jews all around the world. It's like the flag of the Houthis. Have you seen the flag of the Houthis? What does the flag of the Houthis say? It says Allah Akbar, right? God is the greatest. And then it says death to America, death to the Jews, or death to Israel, curse the Jews, right? And that's their flag. That literally, what is the Houthi flag? Here. Houthi flag. Next. Right? You can even see a photo of it. Can I put this? Can I put this? Here, yeah. Victory Islam. So here, let me see if I can show this to you. Here, look, that is the Houthi flag. Right? The top line says, God is the greatest, Allahu Akbar. The second line says, death to America. The third line says, death to Israel. The fourth line in green, the fourth line also in red says, cursed be upon the Jews. And the fifth line, the one there at the bottom in green, says, victory to Islam. So again, the top line is green, the bottom line is green. That says God is the greatest, and the bottom says victory to Islam. And right there in the middle, it says death to America, death to Israel, curse be upon the Jews. That's the Houthi flag. That's literally what it says. Okay? So like, it's not like we're just saying this to be haters on them. No, it's literally their national symbol. Like that's their flag. What is your flag? What is your country's flag? Does it have text on it? If it does have text on it, does it have hateful text on it? By the way, it's not the only country in the world that has hateful text on it. Right? And they're not the only organization that has hateful text on it. Some other texts are less hateful or not hateful. on what people put on flags. But generally speaking, there are symbols on flags. On the Houthi flag, no symbols, just angry text. Literally just angry text. That's it. It's just like, that's their flag. God is the greatest. Death to America. Death to Israel. Curse upon the Jews, or cursed be the Jews, and and victory. It's just, sometimes when you live in the Middle East, or when you spend a lot of time in the Middle East, you understand that there's craziness, and that people in the West who have the loveliest of intentions have zero comprehension of what it's actually like to live in a place that's constantly under existential threat. And people will say, oh, Israel's not under any existential threat. You have the most powerful army in the neighborhood. What are you talking about? Nobody's a threat to Israel. There are 2 billion Muslims and more spread across 57 Muslim countries, of which 22 are Arab countries. When I say they're Muslim countries and Arab countries, and then people say, well, but Israel is an ethno state. Sorry, there's 57 Muslim countries. And you're going to complain about the one Jewish state, which isn't even governed by Jewish law, which has equal rights for all of its citizens? There's 22 Arab states, and you're going to complain about the one Jewish state that doesn't even have higher or more rights for Jews than Arabs. In fact, Arabs have essentially more rights than Israelis, because Arabs don't have to serve in the army, unless they're Druze Arabs, in which case most of them do. Not all of them, but most of them do. But guess what? They don't just serve, they volunteer for combat units, and they are very much a part of Israel's best fighters. A lot of the Druze end up in the commando units because they're some of the best fighters that Israel has. They are very fierce and very loyal and amazing people. And they are our brothers and sisters in Israel. And we don't think of them as second-class citizens at all. They are completely our equal. And by the way, so are the other Arabs, who are like Muslim Arabs and Christian Arabs, even those that don't serve. They are our brothers and sisters in Israel. Yes, they may practice a different religion. So what? If they're Israeli and they're peaceful and they follow the law, why would we have any problem with them? And the vast majority of them are. And yes, some of them consider themselves Palestinian and not Israeli, but they still have a Palestinian passport. I mean, an Israeli passport, right? Palestinian passport is a bit of a joke. It was a document created to let Arabs travel from Judea, Samaria, and Gaza to certain other places around the world on that document, right? Namely, Arab countries and other countries that would recognize that document, especially when Arafat was alive, and even after he was gone. And even today, it's recognized in some places, in a bunch of countries. But there was also a bunch of countries where they're not welcome. Not because they don't have a state, but because they're suspected of bringing problems with them, meaning terrorism, which is an unfair stereotype to say against all Palestinians. It is absolutely unfair. But guess what? When so much terrorism stems from a group of people over decades, it's not like unwarranted suspicion, right? It's not completely unwarranted suspicion. Is it wrong? Yeah, it's wrong. But is it completely unwarranted? Is it without a basis of any kind? No, unfortunately, it's not, right? Would that it were, we wouldn't be in this situation. But we are in this situation. And a lot of that violence, by the way, was funded by and equipped by and trained by and sponsored by and encouraged by the dictatorship in Iran. Over the past 46 years, right, the government in Iran, the dictatorship, has paid a lot of money, not just to Hamas, not just to Hezbollah, not just to the Houthis, but also to Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other groups like it, whose only purpose is to cause death and destruction in Israel and to Israeli interests and Jewish interests around the world. Like, that is their main mission. and that's what they've been doing, and they've been taking Iranian money. That's why that proxy building that got destroyed in Tehran was so important to their cause, because that proxy building coordinated all of those missions with all those different groups, right? So they coordinated the organization of the groups and the disbursement of funds and training and supplies and propaganda material and whatever. Right, this was a big building where they centralized all of it. Now that doesn't mean that they don't have laptops and can't do the work remotely. No, they could definitely do some of that work remotely, and they obviously are doing that work remotely because right now they don't have that building anymore. Right, so maybe they moved some of their work into other offices, but they're definitely doing that work remotely right now. Right, there's no building for them to meet in terms of like a main building, and a lot of people that worked in that organization were rapidly disassembled with the building. Like the building went very quickly along with its leader and everything else, but that doesn't mean they can't replace everybody in the building extremely quickly. It's a country of 90 million people, many of whom don't have a job and would love to get a salary, even if it comes from the IRGC. They don't care. Eating is better than not eating, right? And you really can't fault them for that, which is why you can't say every single person necessarily in the IRGC is necessarily evil either. Like they may literally be doing that job for survival reasons, which it's hard to hate them for that. Now you could say, well, but then you could say the same thing about the Gestapo. Yeah, there were people who were pressured into being in the Gestapo. Now, the overwhelming majority of them volunteered and had to be vetted to get into it. So no, it's not quite the same, because you couldn't just get into the Gestapo just like that. They didn't just have like, oh, we have a job to fill, you're going to join the Gestapo. No, it was considered an honor and a privilege to be in the Gestapo. But there were some people who were pressured into it and did take the jobs in the Gestapo to fill a void and to not, like that the Gestapo had, and to not basically put their own lives at risk. That did happen, right? And they were not Gestapo fans. They were just, they didn't have a choice. Hold on one second. I need to take a sip of this Viking mug of coffee. By the way, I always find it interesting that people drink Turkish coffee, which is like finely ground black coffee. People who aren't in Turkey typically call it, in many different languages, we call it Turkish coffee because it's a common thing that people drink in Turkey. But in Turkey, they just call it coffee, right? They obviously don't call it Turkish coffee. It's just their coffee. But the Greeks also drink the same thing, and they also just call it coffee. But Greek expats and other people who are fans of Greece don't call it Turkish coffee. They call it Greek coffee. Because there's that whole conflict between Greece and Turkey going back thousands of years, obviously, to the time of literally the Hellenists and the Trojans, right? Helen of Troy and all that. So yeah. Anyway, so the IRGC, like I said to you guys, right now is literally going through people, like they're stopping people in their cars on the roads, on the highways, and they're checking their phones, they're checking their cars, they're patting them down, looking for pieces of paper they might have that they wrote something on it that's against the regime. And they're literally like arresting people is the nicest way to say it. On suspicion, again, of being Mossad agents and Zionist agents, just because they're angry. At the same time, people are reporting, right? You have different outlets reporting about what the impact was of all the bombing and this and that, and what America has to learn from all this, what Iran's going to learn from all this, what's going to happen when the Ayatollah comes back out of hiding, and people complaining that Trump is has been a scapegoat for so long, and and Bibi's been a scapegoat for so long, and now this fighting has finally, gotten some unity behind them. Again, I'll say it again. As long as the regime stays in power, not only nothing was accomplished, it's actually kind of backwards. Like, we've been set back a bit. Now, yes, you can say, what are you talking about? They've taken out, Israel has done an amazing thing, and they did this incredible thing, and they took out all these different assets in such a quick amount of time. Yeah, that's all true. Israel did take out a whole lot of military assets in Iran in 12 days of fighting. They absolutely did. But those are material assets. They can be easily replaced with just time and money. Like, do you understand that? Yes, they lost people. Yes, they even lost leaders. But by the time they replace those material assets, their replacements will have plenty of experience. And remember, they're second or third or fourth or fifth tier. They're not like new to the army, new to the IRGC. They've been in the IRGC for years. Yes, they don't have the same command and control expertise as their boss had. But guess what? People learn to fill shoes pretty quickly, right? People adapt to changing situations pretty quickly. And analysts who are suggesting that the new leaders are more practical somehow and less genocidal than their old leaders are really missing how this works. You don't seem to get it. They're not more practical just because they're younger. They're more extreme because they're younger. They're more zealous because they're younger. It's usually the older ones who get softer with age. Now you can say, well, the Ayatollah's not young. He's pretty extreme. Yeah, because he's a complete nut job. That's why he's the dictator. That's why the Supreme Council of Sages voted for him to lead the country 35 years ago, 36 years in 1989 when the Ayatollah Khomeini died. They put Khamenei in charge because they realized, yeah, he's just as crazy as Khomeini. And he can run this place for a long time. He's young enough to last for decades. And they were right. He's lasted decades. And the Council of Sages, or whatever they call them, the people who hold the real power in Iran, they can control him. They manipulate him perfectly. He's a puppet. He does whatever they say. That's what he's supposed to do. That's how their government is structured. That's how the dictatorship is structured. You got old men behind the scenes that most people don't even know who they are. Bunch of ayatollahs, by the way. It's not just like one ayatollah in all of Iran. No, there's many ayatollahs. And a bunch of them, like a dozen or 30 or whatever the number is. I think it's 30. On the Council of Sages, or whatever they call it, that control the Ayatollah, who is called the supreme leader. He's only the supreme leader mostly in the spiritual sense, and normally he has control over the IRGC and the military operations. But he doesn't actually, get involved in the tactical stuff that the IRGC does. Even if he tells them, do this attack or whatever, he's not actually planning or doing anything with the actual attack. He's just ordering the generals to do it. And the generals of the IRGC control that military, which is really the military that first and foremost maintains order within the country, meaning brutalizes the people in the country and makes sure there are no spies and other people who don't like the regime in the country. And the second thing that they do is they lead terrorist attacks around the world. They fund and train terrorist attacks. They conduct terrorist attacks themselves. They attack, Israel directly with their missiles, etc. They provide the drones to the Russians, the Shahed drones that are used by Russia in Ukraine, and you've for sure heard that Russia's making more and more of them themselves. Yeah, but Iran still provides most of them, and even though Russia may know how to build some parts of them, Russia obviously builds its own drones too, by the way. But they like buying the ones from Iran because it's kind of a way for them to show that they support Iran's dictatorship in some way. And you got to remember, why is Russia's alliance with Iran so important? It's important to Iran because they need an ally that actually has material support for them, that gives them money for drones. And Russia needs it because Putin needs the alliance, because without that, he has no more foot really in anything to do with the Middle East or Central Asia that's connected to the Middle East. because Persia is not in the Middle East, right? It's just to the east of the Middle East. Like Iraq is the end of the Middle East. After east of Iraq, it's already Central Asia. It's not Western Asia. Western Asia is the Middle East. Central Asia and Eastern Asia, not the Middle East. But people, especially in the West, don't comprehend that. They think, oh, whatever. If it's a Muslim country, it's the Middle East. No. Many Muslim countries, 57 Muslim countries around the world, all the way in East Asia. You got Malaysia and Indonesia. They're also primarily Muslim countries. In fact, Indonesia is the world's biggest Muslim country, 200 million people, right? 200 million or 300 million? It's hundreds of millions of people. I think it's 300 million people. Hang on. Indonesia population size. Let's take a look. Indonesia population size. I think it's 200 million, right? Yeah, 281 million. Quickly becoming 300 million soon. 281 million people. Like, not quite as big as America, but as big as America was about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, right? It is a massive population. 281 million people in one country, primarily Muslim. Right? Not all Muslim. They have a lot of religions there, but primarily Muslim. And that does include some fanatic groups, right? Just like Malaysia, very diverse, very wonderful place, very amazing place, primarily Muslim, but very mixed, lots of different religions, mostly moderates, wonderful people for the most part. And most Malaysians I've met, I mean, all Malaysians I've met actually are really wonderful people. But there are some extremist groups there, just like there's some extremist groups in the Philippines. Did you know that? There's Muslim extremists in the Philippines, which is a mostly Catholic country, right? But there are some Muslim extremists on certain islands in different areas of the country where the Muslim extremists are pretty brutal, and occasionally they take people hostage, and sometimes they brutalize them or execute them or whatever. Normally they take them hostage for ransom, and when they get paid, they release them, but not always. But the point is, there's 57 or whatever Muslim countries, of which 22 are Arab. It's an insanely high number, right? And so the violence that the IRGC is able to spread around through those 57 countries is enormous, right? They have a lot of reach globally around not just the Middle East, but also all of Asia. And by the way, there's countries in Latin America where they have not just sleeper cells, but active criminal gangs doing things, right? Hezbollah is notorious for having a car operation, a laundry operation for cars, right? Where they steal cars, recycle them, and then resell them through different dealerships or whatever, profiting from stolen cars. Notorious. They do this like you breathe. They do this. They raise a lot of money that way, right? They steal cars in one country, sell it, and recycle it somewhere else, and then sell it somewhere else. They do this all the time. And that money goes directly into Hezbollah's pockets. And that doesn't even, yes, Iran probably helped them set that up, but Iran doesn't have to pay for that on an ongoing basis because it's a profitable enterprise for them. It just keeps making money. And yeah, maybe Iran gets a cut. I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But that is a cash stream, a revenue stream that Hezbollah created so that they wouldn't be dependent 100% on just money donations from Iran and whoever else might give them money. But primarily Iran, because that's their main sponsor. And it's just a way for bad guys to raise money. So that is the long and short of it, of what's happening right now. Now, what is happening with Trump? Right. Well, Trump, if you didn't see it, gave a speech yesterday at NATO and had a meeting at NATO and said a lot of different things. And he made all kinds of claims. He claimed that Israel has already sent agents into Fordo and saw total devastation and nobody can even get into the place. He's claiming the Americans are sending people there in the next year. Like, I'm sorry, but it's BS. You don't announce when your spies are going into some place, or when your allies' spies are going into some place ahead of time. It's nonsense. You're putting their lives directly at risk if you do that. Oh, yes, we're going to have spies go in there at Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning. I mean, do you hear the utter nonsense? Have you ever heard anybody like legitimately say when spies are going to go and do something at a certain time or day? It's utter nonsense. Any intelligence gathered about the bombing sites at Fordo or Natanz or Isfahan, where the B-2s dropped bombs and where the U.S. submarine shot a bunch of Tomahawks, any of those sites, the only intel that you can say for sure has been gathered is satellite imagery, right, and other kinds of imagery taken from maybe very long distances, and those would be more, horizontal than vertical, unless you had some kind of drones or whatever flying over the sites. So the probability of that bomb damage assessment being completely verifiable and authoritative is very low. Maybe I should have put Trump in the headline of this video. I noticed that whenever I do that, there's more people watching. Interesting. He also said that America would be meeting with Iran in the coming days or weeks, like directly. And Rubio said it again. He already said that over the weekend. Rubio, whatever, he's a very good speaker at saying whatever his boss will tell him to say. Currently, his boss is Trump, so he says whatever Trump wants him to say. He's very good at saying things. He's frankly very good at speaking about the issues. He doesn't have any backbone, which is why he's the Secretary of State, because he'll flip-flop on a dime. You remember how ardent he was about supporting Ukraine, and then when they had that horrible meeting at the White House, he just sat there like a bump on a log, and he didn't like what Trump and Vance were doing, but he didn't object. He didn't interject and try to cool things down, as a Secretary of State should do. He just let them have their way with Zelensky, and he just sat there like looking like an idiot. And he's very good at speaking clearly about issues, but he's also very good at shutting up and just letting his bosses say whatever they're going to say. And again, which is fine, like in the corporate world, if you're trying to protect your job because you need your job and you need your income. But he's a very successful person who has become the Secretary of State after being U.S. Senator. Like, he's not like some schmuck who's worried about not being able to pay the rent or have his, his salary next month. Right? He's doing okay. And he has no backbone. So that makes him a perfect Trump puppet, right? And again, it's not like I hate Trump or anything. That's what Trump wants. That's how he staffs his administration. This administration is filled with puppets who will do whatever he says, and that's the way he wants it. You may not like that. You may like that. I personally don't really care. To me, if you serve a presidential administration, that's kind of your role. And people say, well, he's running it like a gang. Yeah, governments are like gangs. They have power by fiat. Do you understand what that means? That means that the government has power because they say so. And what ensures that they have the power because they say so? Do you know? The force of guns. The force of guns, right? They can come to your house and they can impose law upon you. And if you refuse, they can impose penalties upon you up to and including death. That's what the force of guns means. You may not like it, but that is what it means. And you may say, well, that sounds like a terrorist state. Well, yes, arguably, you can say that all states, in theory, you could call them that, but not in practicality, because not all states actually practice that. That's the big difference. But yes, all states, at the end of the day, if they want to not have chaos, impose order on people, whether they like it or not, and that includes the use of force. Meaning guns. Meaning the power of life and death over their citizenry. That's how they enforce the laws. You may not like that, and you may say, what are you talking about? Our government, I live in a European country, we don't have a death penalty. Right, you may think you don't have a death penalty, but if you go running around blasting citizens away in a mass casualty event, and you're the cause of it, or they suspect you're the cause of it, and there's an active shooter situation going on, and you're the suspect, you might not walk away from that situation. They might have a sniper take you out. That means they have the power of life and death. Again, I'm not saying that most countries are a terrorist state. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that most countries run their governments in that sort of system. They have the ultimate power of life and death in their country. That's why it's called sovereignty. The sovereign power of the government, whether it's a king or a prince or a president or a prime minister or a parliament or a other kind of body, the sovereign power of that government is the law of the land. And that means that they have the ultimate power to decide who lives and who does not in their land. Do you understand? All governments are that way. All governments are that way. By the way, if you think I'm wrong, tell me, what government doesn't do that? Meaning, what government doesn't have ultimate sovereign power in their own borders? Because they all have one duty: national security, right? Every government, every national government has a duty of national sovereignty, has a duty of national security. Therefore, they all have to have the power of life and death. Now, that doesn't mean they're all terrorists at all. But they are set up like a gang, in a sense. Some are more sophisticated than others. Some are less obviously like gangs than others. Some seem more democratic than others. Some are more democratic than others. But they all have a structure, a power structure that ultimately gives the power of life or death, or maintains the power of life or death in the hands of the government that controls that land. It's not complicated. This isn't news shattering information, but a lot of people aren't aware of this, and they're shocked by how Trump behaves. He's just a president. By the way, he himself said yesterday during the speech at NATO, right, that if Iran does these shenanigans again in the coming years and starts rebuilding their thing, in however many years time, 3, 4, 5 years time or more, right, that there is always the option to go and take them out. And he said, it won't be me, but it'll be the next president, whoever it is. Did that get by you? If you have Trump derangement syndrome, or if you just don't like Trump, you don't have to have Trump derangement syndrome to not like Trump. But if you just don't like Trump and you think he's going to try to stay in office forever, did that message get by you? He said he's not going to be president in however many years' time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, whenever he's done with his term, 3 years from now, right? 4 years from now. He said it multiple times. He's not going to run for president again. He wants to go and live out his life playing golf in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, he's already not young. How much time does he have left with all the Big Macs he eats? Seriously. He's not fit, right? It's a miracle he's lived this long. I mean, the guy plays golf. That doesn't keep you fit. Driving around in a golf cart, walking miles, right, between the holes, a few feet here, a few feet there, riding around in a golf cart and swinging a golf stick. That's not exactly heavy exercise. Golf isn't about the sport. For those of you who don't know, golf is about the deals. That's why people play golf at a certain level, especially at his level, right? That's like literally golf, as George Carlin goes, golf is where the powerful go to play to cut up the rest of the world. The control of the rest of the world. That's what it is. The game of golf is the networking and the deals. the power brokering and all that stuff. That's golf. Okay, now you can say, what are you talking about? It's a sport. Professionals play it. Tiger Woods is the greatest golf athlete of all time, blah, blah, blah. It's a game, first of all. Not exactly an athletic game. Well, yeah, we're talking about Tiger Woods practice so many hours to get so good. Yeah, if you want to be an elite golfer, sure, you can tell me that they practiced and whatever, but I can point to plenty of extremely out of shape and amazing golfers in the history of golf, right? There's plenty of amazing pro golfers who never were physically in shape and were amazing golfers. They never had to walk miles and miles and power lift and do all this weight training and exercise and this aerobic exercise and all this kind of stuff. They didn't do that. They just played golf really well. What does that mean? They learned how to hold the stick, stand in the right pose, swing the stick, hit the ball into the hole very well, right? Like approach the hole and then approach it again and then hit it in, right? Like that's golf. And then get in a little cart and drive around from one hole to the next. I'm not dissing golf here. I'm just saying when people pretend like it's some kind of super athletic game or sport, it's not. It's just not, okay? If you've ever played golf, you ought to know that, right? The person getting the heaviest workout in golf is usually the caddy because he's actually lifting, or he or she is actually lifting the bag full of golf clubs, which is like the heaviest thing you do in golf. Yeah, I'm sorry, but if that's what you consider to be heavy athletics, you don't know what heavy athletics is, right? Try rugby, try American football, try rowing. Those are heavy athletic sports, right? They require a lot of strength and endurance. Try cross country, try downhill skiing, which even that is you're going downhill on skis, but there is a lot of control and speed and strength issues involved there because for safety you need to be pretty strong to be in control and all that stuff. But still, you get my point, right? It's not exactly golf is not exactly heavy athletics. It's all about the politics and power and business deals and everything else. That's the point of golf. If you're a wealthy person and like a politician, why do politicians play golf? Why do business executives play golf? Why do these people who are not known to be athletic people love playing golf? Right? Tennis is 1,000 times more athletic than golf. Plenty of very successful people who tend to play tennis too, but they don't tend to usually do deals on the tennis courts because it's not as chill of an environment. You're much more like your blood is pumping. You're not thinking necessarily as straight in the moment of the sport. It's an athletic sport. Tennis, you got to run around the court back and forth. Like if you're good at it, it's a very, very physically demanding sport. You got to have a lot of endurance and a lot of strength and a lot of speed and a lot of coordination. It's not an easy sport compared to golf, certainly. Again, why am I talking about golf so much? I'm not dissing golf. I'm just saying the point of golf is to divvy up the world among the powerful. Because why among the powerful? Who tends to be able to afford golf club memberships? Very poor people going to public courses, or people who pay for private club memberships, which are usually expensive. Trump owns multiple golf courses. You think people going to his clubs are not paying him tremendous amounts of money? Then they're paying him a lot of money to be members of his golf clubs. Why do you think they're paying him a lot of money to be members of a golf club? Because of the quality of the great sandwiches and rubber chicken in his restaurants there? Or because they're likely to meet other people there who have a lot of money and shared business interests and they can do, power deals? Yeah, that's the reason. Like, if you really think there's another reason rich people join golf clubs other than to socialize, it's really not to socialize. It's to do deals. Yes, they socialize and do deals while they're socializing, right? Their wives and girlfriends or whatever are there to socialize and whatever. I'm not dissing that. I'm just saying that's traditionally what you have. There are also some very powerful women who go to golf clubs who are not just great golf players in some cases. They're also power brokers. But most of the women and, our wives and girlfriends or daughters, sisters, whatever, listen, if they're very traditional, they're not the power brokers. In most cases, even in the US, as liberal as a country as it might be, as much as you got equal rights and everything else, yeah, in traditional families, this is, have you ever seen on YouTube, if you're a younger person, you ever seen trad wife? You ever seen that? You know what trad wives are? Right? You know what that is, right? Traditional wives were subordinates to their husband. That means they take a back seat to whatever the husband is doing. That means they let the husband lead the household and be the dominant person and all this stuff. What does that mean? That means that they're not going to be the one doing the power brokering. Not because they can't, because they choose not to. It's not how they view the world. They want to, be the one who rears the kids and takes care of the home and makes the home and all that stuff. And I'm not dissing that. I'm just saying that's their tradition. I'm just recognizing the tradition, right? So on golf courses, you typically have men divvying up the world, just like George Carlin said 30 years ago, 40 years ago in his comedy routines about it. Like, this isn't news, earth-shattering information. I'm going into detail I'm being pedantic about it, if you will. I'm not really, but to a degree, to make it clear, right? I'm not just stereotyping here, because there are exceptions to all these things, of course, and I keep saying that because there are. The point is, Trump, right, went to NATO yesterday, or 2 days ago, actually. Yeah, and yesterday he gave, he had a meeting with the head of NATO who congratulated him in person, in addition to the tweet he posted the day before while Trump was flying there, congratulating Trump on getting all of the NATO members, apparently except for Spain, to raise their commitment to NATO to be 5% of their budget, which is a big deal, actually, because for them, 5%, in most cases, they were paying 2-3%, some 4%. Very few, if any, were paying 5%, other than the US, which was paying, I think, like 28% of the overall budget of NATO just by itself, because the US is paying a pretty significant portion. But actually, if you look at the percent that the US, like the annual budget of the US was not leading in terms of its percentage of contribution to NATO. Right? But now every NATO member in Europe or whatever has agreed to pay 5% of their budget, which is insane, but that's what they've done, to NATO, which is going to add like another however many hundreds of billions or maybe even up to $1 trillion eventually to the NATO budget, which will technically mean that the NATO budget will be the single biggest military budget in the world, like bigger than the American military budget. So for all you guys who said, well, Trump's going to dismantle NATO, well, apparently not. Apparently what Trump did is ensure, and again, I'm not a fan of his, but I'm not going to not recognize when he did a good thing. I believe NATO was the most successful military defense alliance in history. It's not I believe, it's a fact. And everybody who's worried, everybody who hates Trump, and even some people who like him, thought, oh, Trump is going to dismantle NATO. And people who didn't like him or don't like him said, oh my God, he's going to dismantle NATO. That's terrible. And people who do like him and for some reason hate the fact that America is involved in foreign wars and military supremacy worldwide, even though that's how the United States maintains its quality of life, by being the world's superpower, by being the world's leading economy. If it wasn't, then the US wouldn't be the peg, the standard world currency reserve, or world reserve currency, or whatever you want to call it, right? Your MAGA people who love Trump but hate sending soldiers to war or police actions would have an even lower quality of life, because America would not be the dominant economy. It would clearly be China, because they make most of the stuff. If their currency was the world currency reserve, they would be the leading economy. Now, you could argue, well, but America's economy is more advanced in manufacturing. It's a service economy. Yeah. But guess what? All of Europe is service economies too. Yeah, they make stuff in Europe, but they make far less in Europe than in Asia. Yes, they might make a bunch of really cool technology stuff, etc., just like they make in America, but the overwhelming majority of the economy in Europe is service economy, just like in America. Which means China, if you're going to say that the leading economy of the world is going to be a manufacturing economy, because that's where the world economy is going to go, like in terms to make their stuff, and the currency is going to be the Chinese yuan, that would make China the world policeman. Do you really want the Chinese Communist Party to police your life? Are you going to tell me, well, they're no worse than the Americans? Really? Really? Does America have a concentration camp filled with millions of Uyghurs, many of whom just disappear forever, and who get brutalized and re-educated by the state? Really? Does America have that? No, because China does. Does America have a social credit score program like China, where if you cross the street on a red light, your name and face and ID number and everything else gets plastered on a billboard at that intersection for whoever knows how long, as a jaywalker and a scofflaw, and then you get minus on your credit score, on your social credit score, which is a real thing there. And depending on what your social credit is, you can or cannot apply for different things, jobs, loans, mortgages, etc. And it's right there on your phone app, and everyone has one, and you can't not have one. If you have a job of any kind, you are required to have a phone. It's required to have WeChat and other kinds of apps on it that the government approves of. And you have to have those things on there. They control your life from end to end, literally from cradle to grave. And you can tell me, China's not that bad. No, China's not that bad in many ways, but China is that bad and worse in many other ways. So no, I wouldn't rather have China be the world policeman than the United States. Thank you very much. And slowly but surely, if that does happen, good luck. I mean that. Like, the world has a problem if China becomes the global policeman, or even just the leading economy. The world will have huge problems. It's no joke. Very, very bad if China becomes the world leading economy. May that not happen. And people will say, well, it's inevitable. No, nothing is inevitable in that sense. We can always change that fact. The question is, will that fact change? That we don't know the answer to yet. They're doing everything they can in China to make that a fact. America should be doing everything it can to prevent that from being a fact and to establish America as a dominant economy and form of government for a very long time. The only way to do that is to improve it, not to make it a dictatorship. Right? You don't have to have the same fate as the Roman Empire. Maybe it is unavoidable. Maybe at some point in the future, America will become subordinate to China. China has a very long strategy, hundreds and hundreds of years. Everybody says, oh, this is the Chinese century. Maybe, but we're already a quarter of the way through the century. It's not yet the Chinese century. Maybe America is able to survive this, but it takes a lot of effort and strategic thinking, not just about this quarter and next year. It takes a long view of hundreds of years. If China has a 100-year plan, America has to have a 300-year plan. And you could say, well, nobody can predict 300 years from now. Really? Because China is doing it. And they're making a 100-year plan. So America should plan for 1,000 years and actually should think 1,000 years from now and plan 200-300 years from now. That's how you do that. Without doing that, they have no chance. You can't just do the same thing that your opponent is doing. You have to do better than them by a lot. Otherwise, you don't have a chance. Right? That's a known fact. It's like when you make a new product. You bring a new product onto the market, you can't make your new product be basically the same thing as the old product. No, your new product has to be significantly better. Otherwise, who's going to use it? Right? If I make the same product as YouTube now and I bring it out to the market, who's going to join my platform, even if it's just as amazing as YouTube, like in terms of features and everything? Even if I manage to get a bunch of content on there, right? I siphon off all the content from YouTube and I put it on my server farm or whatever, and I decentralize my server farms. It's all over the world, and it works just as well as YouTube. Who would switch to it if it's the exact same thing? Literally no one. Okay, there'll be some people who try it, some people who test it, some people who whatever it, but unless it's significantly better, no one is going to actually use it on a regular basis, right? I mean, look at like other video platforms. I don't want to name them because I don't want to offend them. But there's plenty of other video platforms. How are they doing compared to YouTube? They basically don't exist, right? Even if you Google their name, you Google video platforms on YouTube, on the Google or on Bing or on, you search for any big search engine, DuckDuckGo or whatever. You look for video platforms like YouTube, competitors to YouTube, and you'll come up with a list of like 10, 20, 50 names, 100 names. The next nearest one, like if this is YouTube's traffic, the next nearest one is like this. And everyone after that is smaller, quickly approaching zero. Right? It's negligible. The amount of traffic seen on other video platforms is literally negligible to YouTube. That's why they don't care so much about them. There are, though, some things they do care about. For example, you can't sync your videos from certain video platforms to YouTube, which makes no sense. But they don't allow it because they don't want content creators to be able to easily be on multiple platforms at the same time, which is really retarded. But that's because of their stupid view of things. No, you shouldn't call them retarded and stupid. No, there are business decisions that are retarded and stupid. That is one of them. And they do it on purpose. And they have lawyers involved in everything. And it's retarded. Right? And by that I mean it slows down people's businesses. Right? It literally retarded. Right? They retard people's business. It is a stupid business decision for them to do because they're harming their content creators who can easily go somewhere else. And a number of them do. And that number is increasing. Now, they don't care because it's still an insignificant number to them. But if 100 million people left, they would definitely take notice. If 200 million people left, they would definitely take notice. If 500 million people left, that would not be good for them. If 1 billion people left, yeah, they'd be in serious risk, right? There's only a couple billion people using YouTube every month. Now, that's a lot of people. It's about a quarter of the people on the planet. But if half of them left, then they wouldn't necessarily be the king of the hill anymore because somebody else might get that billion. Maybe they'd all go to one place, or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they go to 10 places, and YouTube would still be the king for a while. But if half the people on YouTube left, that would be a significant hit to YouTube's reach and revenues. And that would empower their competitors to grow a lot faster. And the other billion wouldn't have to necessarily leave YouTube, but they could more and more start using the other platforms. And eventually one of them might grow to be as big or bigger than YouTube. Which, by the way, is probably inevitably going to happen at some point in the future. No business tends to last forever. Some do last hundreds of years. But eventually, businesses get outgrown by competitors in some way. Some new invention will come along and make the old business completely moot. Cars made horses and buggies and whips. Moot. Nobody needed horses and buggies and whips after the car was invented. There were many jobs that were lost as well. There were people who used to go around cleaning up streets, specifically from the things that, horses would drop behind them. That job went away. Not necessarily the most pleasant job you can imagine. In fact, definitely not. But that was a job, and a lot of people had it. That job ceased to exist within 5 years. once the car was invented, like on a mass scale, industrialized level. Once cars became popular, like literally once the factory line of Ford Motor Company was running, within 5 years, there were no more horses and buggies and whips. They were hard to find. They were only like niche interests doing that, tour guides and whatever, who wanted to show, let people ride around in a horse and buggy when they're doing a tour of New York kind of thing, because it's like romantic or whatever, right? And people still do that today. Okay, it's cute, whatever. There's a guy in Central Park who lets you ride around his horse and buggy. There's more than one, but like there's not like fleets of horses and buggies taking people up and down New York City. It's cars, like anywhere else that's modern, right? Within 5 years. It's not a long time. And then, yes, that's an example people give all. Anyway, guys, I'm rambling here about, I'm not really rambling, but I'm talking to you guys about a lot of different things here. Way off the original point of this live stream. So, yes, NATO has been assured for the foreseeable future to have more income from member states than it's ever had before, which will probably make it the world's largest military site. And Trump secured that, whether you like that or not, whether you think he was going to dismantle NATO or not. He didn't dismantle NATO. He caused NATO members to commit more than they've ever committed to NATO and make it even more powerful. And notice in his speech, he said yesterday multiple times, Vladimir Putin has to stop this war. And he was criticizing Vladimir Putin by name, which you'll notice is something he mentioned Vladimir Putin by name when talking about the Ukraine-Russia war before. He would often, if not always, mention Zelensky's name. He would rarely speak about Vladimir Putin by name, but now he does, playing footsie games, and he is doing a good thing trying to end that war. I don't like the way he's doing it, but he is trying to end it. Okay, I think he should, have given more immediate support to the Ukrainians, including they could have done other things. They could have given Ukraine other aid. Okay, there are many things. The United States military is compared to Russia and compared to Ukraine, massive. It's not even close. They could have easily given the Ukrainians things that would have made Ukraine been able to defeat Russian drones flying into Ukraine every day. And by Russian drones, I mean mostly made in Iran. That's not good, right? And it's not going to stop now that the Iranians are back in, staying in power. The Iranian dictatorship is staying in power. They're not going anywhere. Trump gave them a hall pass. They get to futz around. They don't have to go back to the classroom. They can do whatever they want. They can still be the bullies of the region, the terrorists of the region. That's what they're going to do. And they can sell oil and gas to China, which is in violation of Trump's own sanctions. So you see, he does good things and he does bad things, like every politician. That's why you shouldn't be, I'm only Team Trump, or I'm only Team Biden, or I'm only Team Harris, or I'm only Team Clinton. It's stupid. If you're a super fan of a politician, you are a sucker, okay? They're just politicians. They're just people. They are filled with flaws. There's nothing wrong in admitting that. There are no perfect people. There are no perfect politicians. If you believe that there are, you're a sucker. You're a fool. Okay? They want you to believe that there are. Of course they want you to believe that. Why wouldn't they want you to believe that? And they use all the power of propaganda at their disposal, no matter what the country is. But that doesn't mean you should actually just drink the Kool-Aid on whatever team you're on. Don't. Be skeptical. Be realistic. Be reasonable. Be intelligent and be wise. Right? Think about what the politicians are telling you. Are they telling you things that are provably true or provably false? Are they telling you things that are neither? Don't be suckered by politicians. Be skeptical. It's very useful. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for now. This has been a very long live stream, and I have gone way overboard on my time. So, I got to get back to what I got to get doing in the unknown lands of the real world. So, in and out. I'm already late for that. I got to get heading out now. So, I'll see you guys later. Peace.